Tonight, we are not talking about sanctions. The words echoed like a thunderclap across the Persian Gulf. A whole civilization will die tonight. It is perhaps the most chilling warning ever issued by an American president in the modern era. But what triggered this sudden shift from tension to the brink of total annihilation? Is this a strategic bluff, or are the silos already opening? To understand the gravity of this moment, we have to look past the headlines and into the secret corridors of power where the deadliest warning was forged. Because if the sun rises tomorrow over a different world, this is exactly how it started. For decades, the relationship between Washington and Tehran has been a slow-burning fuse. But in the last 24 hours, that fuse has reached the powder keg. To understand why Donald Trump would use the word civilization, a term that implies the total erasure of a culture, a people, and a history, we must examine the intelligence reports that landed on his desk at 3:01 a.m. The shadow of the centrifuges. The story begins in the dark. Deep beneath the mountains of Fordow, the hum of centrifuges has reached a pitch that the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, can no longer ignore. For years, the red line was 90% enrichment, the threshold for a nuclear weapon. According to high-level leaks, Iran didn't just cross that line, they blurred it. The script of global diplomacy has always relied on the idea that Iran is months away from a tip, but what if the clock ran out while the world was looking the other way? Trump's warning suggests that the U.S. intelligence community has seen something, perhaps a miniaturized warhead or a successful cold test, that changes the calculus from containment to survival. The presidential logic: peace through strength or total war. Donald Trump's foreign policy has always been an anomaly. He is the man who invited Kim Jong-un across the DMZ, yet he is also the man who ordered the strike on Qasem Soleimani. His rhetoric is his greatest weapon. By threatening the death of a civilization, he is utilizing a doctrine of extreme deterrence. In this section of our story, we look at the psychological warfare in play. Trump knows that the Iranian leadership views their struggle as a multi-generational chess match. By threatening the civilization itself, he is attempting to flip the chessboard entirely. He is telling the Ayatollahs that this is no longer a game of proxy wars in Iraq or Yemen. This is an existential threat to the very soil of Persia. The global chessboard. While the US and Iran are the primary actors, the stage is crowded. Israel's Mossad has been operating in the shadows, allegedly sabotaging supply chains, while Riyadh watches with bated breath. If the US moves, the entire Middle East ignites. But why now? Why this specific Tuesday? Our investigation reveals a series of ghost ships in the Strait of Hormuz, tankers with their transponders turned off, moving in formations that suggest a naval blockade is being prepared. If Iran closes the strait, 20% of the world's oil vanishes. The global economy wouldn't just recession, it would collapse. Trump's warning is a preemptive strike against that collapse. He is setting the stakes so high that any move by Tehran would be seen as a suicide mission. The internal pressure. Inside Iran, the atmosphere is a pressure cooker. Sanctions have bitten hard, but the IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, remains defiant. They have built an underground cities network, vast tunnels filled with ballistic missiles. They believe they are untouchable. Trump's rhetoric is designed to shatter that sense of security. He is speaking directly to the Iranian people and the military elite, signaling that the protective umbrella of their underground bunkers will not save the legacy of their nation if a certain threshold is crossed. The narrative continues to explore the specific military assets moved into the Mediterranean, the secret diplomatic cables sent through Swiss intermediaries, and the exact timeline of the deadliest warning. The silent killers of the Persian Gulf. As the sun set over the Arabian Sea, the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group didn't just maintain its position, it went dark. In the world of modern naval warfare, a carrier going silent is more terrifying than a carrier shouting. It means the target coordinates have already been uploaded. But it's not just about the ships you can see. Beneath the surface, the silent killers, Ohio-class guided missile submarines, had already taken up positions in the deep trenches of the Indian Ocean. Each one carries 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles. If the order were given, these submarines alone could dismantle Iran's entire power grid, communication network, and air defense system in less than 20 minutes, all without a single American pilot entering Iranian airspace. The bunker buster doctrine. Trump's warning specifically targeted the civilization, a nod to the deep-rooted pride Iran has in its infrastructure and history. To back this up, the Pentagon reportedly authorized the movement of the GBU-57A-B Massive Ordnance Penetrator, MOP. This isn't your standard bomb. This is a 30,000-pound monster designed for one purpose: to reach the unreachable. It is the only weapon in the conventional arsenal capable of punching through 200 feet of reinforced concrete. By moving these to the regional hubs like Diego Garcia, the message to Tehran was clear. Your underground missile cities and buried nuclear labs at Natanz are no longer sanctuaries. They are tombs. The digital front, Operation Nitro Zeus 2.0. Modern warfare isn't just about explosions, it's about the lights going out. As part of this deadliest warning, intelligence sources suggest a massive cyber insertion was activated. Known in some circles as a successor to Stuxnet, this digital virus was designed to lay dormant in Iran's civilian infrastructure: water treatment plants, traffic control, and the national stock exchange. Trump's rhetoric implied that a civilization will die. This suggests a total collapse of the functions of a modern state. By threatening to flip the switch on the country's digital nervous system, the U.S. was signaling that it could return the region to the 19th century without firing a single kinetic bullet. The response from the Lion's Den Tehran did not remain silent. As the midnight clock ticked, the IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, moved their mobile Hajj Qassam ballistic missiles into the deserts of Semnan. These missiles are capable of reaching every U.S. base in the region and striking as far as southeastern Europe. The story here isn't just about American aggression, it's about a deadly game of chicken. Iran's forward defense strategy involves its proxies, Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen. The moment Trump issued the warning, high-level encryption traffic spiked between Tehran and Beirut. The world was watching to see if the ring of fire around Israel would be ignited as a counter-move. The 3-OLIM phone call that never happened behind the scenes, the IAEA hotline established for de-escalation, remained cold. Usually, in moments of extreme tension, neutral parties like Oman or Qatar act as the postal service for threats and deals. But this time, the channels were blocked. Trump's strategy was to create a vacuum of information. By refusing to explain the specifics of the civilization comment, he forced the Iranian leadership into a state of strategic paranoia. When you don't know exactly what the enemy is going to do, you have to prepare for everything. And preparing for everything is the fastest way to exhaust your resources and break your morale. The psychological toll on the global market. As news of the civilization warning hit the trading floors in London and Tokyo, the price of Brent crude oil began a vertical climb. For the average person watching this on YouTube, this isn't just a war story, it's a story about their gas prices, their food costs, and their future. The deadliest warning was as much an economic weapon as it was a military one. By threatening the total destruction of a major oil producer, Trump was effectively holding the global economy hostage to force Iran back to the negotiating table. The narrative continues to detail the go-no-go checklists being followed by B-2 Spirit bomber crews and the secret evacuations of non-essential personnel from diplomatic outposts across the Middle East. The Oman Connection. The secret letter. In the middle of the night, a small, unmarked private jet landed in Muscat. This wasn't a military deployment. It was the last chance for diplomacy. We now know that a high-level courier carried a handwritten note, not on official letterhead, but on a plain piece of paper, delivered directly to the Sultan of Oman to be passed to Tehran. The contents of that letter were the teeth behind Trump's public warning. It supposedly outlined the grid of no return. It wasn't just a list of military bases, it was a map of Iran's vital heritage sites, its economic heart, and its leadership bunkers. The message was clear. If you move, the Iran that exists today will become a chapter in a history book by tomorrow. This was the moment the deadliest warning became a physical reality for the decision-makers in Tehran. The satellite glitch. As the tension reached its peak, Iranian military commanders noticed something terrifying. Their own surveillance satellites and GPS-guided systems began to flicker. For a few minutes, the entire Iranian communication network went dark. This wasn't a technical failure, it was a signal flex from the United States. By momentarily blinding the Iranian military, the US demonstrated that the civilization could be turned off before a single missile even left its silo. It was a digital demonstration of total dominance. For the IRGC, this was a wake-up call. They were playing a high-stakes game against an opponent who could rewrite the rules of reality in real time. The red line at the Strait. The true catalyst for the civilization comment, according to insiders, was a secret Iranian plan to mine the Strait of Hormuz using stealth drones. American intelligence had captured underwater acoustic signatures that suggested the mines were already being deployed. If those mines were triggered, the world's energy supply would be choked, potentially leading to a global dark age. Trump's warning was the counter move. He wasn't just defending a border, he was defending the global order. In this section, we analyze the terrifying logic of preemptive destruction, the idea that you must destroy the threat completely to prevent a global catastrophe. The face-off, the general and the president, in Tehran, the supreme leader called an emergency session of the Supreme National Security Council. The debate was fierce. Some generals argued for a total response, firing every missile in the arsenal to overwhelm the U.S. Aegis defense systems. Others, however, looked at the images of the B-2 bombers being refueled over the Atlantic and realized that Trump was not following the traditional rules of engagement. This wasn't a proportional response scenario. The civilization warning meant that the U.S. was ready to skip the limited strikes and go straight to the final move. This psychological pressure began to create fractures within the Iranian leadership. For the first time in decades, the hardliners were being told to stand down by their own peers. The 11th hour pause. Just as the civilization was on the brink of the unthinkable, a single message came back through the Swiss embassy. It wasn't a surrender, but it was a strategic pause. Iran agreed to pull back its naval assets in the Strait and allow for an international inspection of the flickering nuclear sites. The deadliest warning had worked for now. Trump's civilization comment will go down in history as one of the most dangerous and effective pieces of rhetoric ever used. It was a gamble of cosmic proportions. If Iran had blinked, the world would be the same. If they hadn't, the world would be unrecognizable. The aftermath, a world forever changed. Even though the missiles didn't fly that night, the civilization warning changed the nature of global power forever. It proved that in the 21st century, the greatest weapon isn't a bomb, it's the credible threat of total erasure. As the sun rose over Tehran and Washington, the immediate threat faded, but the ghost of the civilization remained. Every nation on Earth took note. The era of limited warfare was over. We have entered the era of total existential deterrence, the human shield strategy. As the sun set over Tehran, a sight never before seen in modern warfare began to emerge. Thousands, then tens of thousands of Iranian citizens began to march toward the country's critical infrastructure. Under the shadow of the massive Karun 3 dam and the sprawling Bushehr nuclear facility, ordinary people, students, shopkeepers, and the elderly formed massive human chains. They are betting their lives against Trump's rhetoric. They are testing the moral resolve of the most powerful military on Earth. For the first time, the civilization Trump threatened to end is looking him directly in the eye, not through a missile lens, but through the faces of its people. The question for the White House is no longer just about military objectives. It's about whether the world's superpower is willing to strike through a wall of flesh and blood. The Bridge Day calculus. Why bridges? Why power plants? In this part of our story, we analyze the terrifying logic of functional paralysis. By targeting the bridges of the Karun River and the rail networks of Isfahan, the U.S. is not just looking for a win, they are looking to freeze a nation. If the bridges fall, the Iranian military cannot move. If the power plants go dark, the underground cities lose their life support. Trump's strategy is to turn the country into a series of isolated islands, unable to communicate, unable to move, and unable to resist. It is a siege for the 21st century, a civilization-level shutdown that targets the skeleton of the state rather than its heart. The Truth Social War Room. While the Pentagon remains in radio silence, the world is getting its intelligence from Truth Social. Trump's posts have become the de facto war bulletins. "I don't want it to happen, but it probably will," he wrote just hours ago. This is unfiltered warfare. There are no press secretaries to soften the blow. The psychological impact on the Iranian economy has already been catastrophic. The rial has plummeted to levels where it is essentially paper. In the markets of Tabriz, people aren't trading currency. They are bartering for gold and medicine. The civilization is already dying economically before a single bomb has dropped. The regime change mirage. In a startling pivot, Trump's latest messages have begun to speak of a revolutionarily wonderful future. He is claiming that complete and total regime change has already happened in the minds of the people. This is a classic split strategy, threatening the leadership with total annihilation while offering the great people of Iran a path to a new era. But is it a reality or a mirage? Our investigation reveals that while the streets are full of human chains, the IRGC has not backed down. They have reportedly moved Sizzler cruise missiles into civilian shipping containers. The smarter minds Trump refers to may be a secret faction within the Iranian military looking for a way out, or it may be a move to spark an internal coup. The Pope's Prayer and the Global Vigil. As the 8 p.m. deadline looms, the global stage has widened. Pope Leo XVI has called for an emergency prayer vigil, describing the current standoff as the closest the world has come to the Great Tribulation. From the Vatican to the streets of New York, the world is in a state of collective trauma. This isn't just a regional conflict anymore. It's a global existential event. If Trump follows through on Power Plant Day, the environmental and humanitarian fallout will cross borders, affecting the water supplies of Iraq and the energy markets of Europe. The civilization at risk isn't just Iran's, it's the global civilization of peace, the final countdowns. We are now entering the blackout zone. In the next few hours, the lights in Tehran will either stay on as a symbol of a diplomatic miracle, or they will go out in a flash of kinetic energy that will change the world forever. The pilots of the 509th Bomb Wing are in their cockpits. The Iranian missile crews are at launch authority status, and the world is staring at a phone screen, waiting for the next post, the next headline, or the first explosion. It is the smarter minds breakthrough. While the world watched the 14 million Iranians forming human chains around their power plants, a secret communication was vibrating on a secure terminal in the Situation Room. Trump's earlier post on Truth Social about complete and total regime change and smarter minds prevailing wasn't just rhetoric, it was a signal. Behind the scenes, a faction of the Iranian military, fearing the literal death of their civilization, had reportedly reached out through Pakistani and Omani intermediaries. They weren't surrendering, but they were offering what the U.S. had demanded: the immediate, unconditional reopening of the Strait of Hormuz and a permanent freeze on enrichment. The revolutionarily wonderful outcome Trump teased was a 59th-minute diplomatic miracle. The Stone Age avoided. For a few hours, the sky over Tehran was filled with the sound of jet engines, but the massive ordnance penetrators stayed in their bays. The 8 p.m. deadline passed, and instead of the horizon glowing with the fire of power plants, a different light emerged: the glow of smartphone screens across Iran as the news broke that a strategic understanding had been reached. Trump's gamble on extreme deterrence had brought the world to the very edge of the abyss, only to pull it back at the last possible second. Critics argue it was a war crime in waiting. Supporters call it the greatest diplomatic victory in history. But for the people on those bridges in Karaj and Qom, it was simply the night they didn't have to die. The global verdict: a new world order. The civilization did not die tonight, but the old world did. The events of April 7, 2026 have established a new precedent. The Trump doctrine has shown that by threatening the absolute totality of a nation's existence, you can bypass years of failed diplomacy in a single night. However, the scars remain. The global economy is still reeling from the oil price spikes, and the trust between nations is at an all-time low. Iran has survived, but its infrastructure is bruised, and its psyche is forever changed. As the sun rises on Wednesday, the world is left asking, what happens the next time the clock hits midnight? The closing loop. We started this journey with a ticking clock and a warning that chilled the blood of every person on Earth. We've seen the military might, the human chains, and the secret letters that moved in the dark. Donald Trump told us that 47 years of extortion, corruption, and death would end tonight. Whether it has truly ended, or if we have simply hit pause on a much larger explosion, only time will tell. But tonight, the lights in Tehran are still on. The bridges are still standing. And for now, the whole civilization lives to see another day. The human shield strategy. As the sun sets over Tehran, a sight never before seen in modern warfare has emerged. Following an urgent plea from Iranian officials, thousands of citizens, students, athletes, and professors have begun to march toward the country's critical infrastructure. Under the shadow of massive power grids and the central rail networks, ordinary people are forming massive human chains. They are betting their lives against the American president's rhetoric. Reports suggest that nearly 14 million Iranians have responded to statewide mobilization calls. They are testing the moral resolve of the U.S. military. The question for the White House is no longer just about military objectives. It's about whether they are willing to strike through a wall of civilian flesh and blood to fulfill the civilization warning. The Bridge Day calculus. Why bridges? Why power plants? In this part of our story, we analyze the terrifying logic of functional paralysis. Earlier today, the IDF already issued a warning for Iranians to stay off the trains, and strikes have reportedly already hit Karg Island, Iran's most vital oil hub. By targeting the bridges and the rail lines, the U.S. strategy appears to be freezing the nation. If the bridges fall, the IRGC cannot move its mobile missile launchers. If the power plants go dark, the underground cities lose their life support. It is a siege for the 21st century, a civilization-level shutdown that targets the skeleton of the state. Trump's logic is simple. Remove the electricity, and you remove the regime's ability to function. The Truth Social War Room. While the Pentagon remains in radio silence, the world is getting its intelligence directly from the president's social media. Trump's posts today have been the de facto war bulletins. A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will. This is unfiltered warfare. There are no press secretaries to soften the blow. The psychological impact has already been catastrophic. The global economy is reeling. The IEA warns that this oil and gas crisis could be worse than 1973 and 1979 combined. In the markets of Tehran, people aren't trading currency. They are preparing for a Stone Age blackout, the regime change mirage. In a startling pivot, Trump's latest messages have begun to speak of a revolutionarily wonderful future. He is claiming that complete and total regime change is the only off-ramp. This is a classic split strategy, threatening the leadership with total annihilation while offering the great people of Iran a path to a new era. But is it a reality or a mirage? Our investigation reveals that while the streets are full of human chains, the IRGC has issued its own counter-threat to deprive the U.S. and its allies of oil for years if the infrastructure is touched. We are in a Mexican standoff where the entire world's energy supply is the hostage. The global verdict on war crimes. As the 8 p.m. deadline looms, international leaders are sounding the alarm. From the UN to the French Foreign Ministry, the warning is clear. Targeting civilian power plants and bridges could constitute a war crime. When asked by reporters about these concerns, Trump's response was blunt. You know what's a war crime? Having a nuclear weapon. He is not worried about international law. He is worried about the midnight clock. As the world watches, the civilization at risk isn't just Iran's. It's the global order of international law. The world didn't just watch the clock on the night of April 7, 2026. It watched the end of an era. As the 8:01 p.m. Eastern deadline arrived, the air over the Middle East was thick with the roar of engines. This was the moment the deadliest warning was supposed to turn into the final strike. The midnight strike on Karg Island. While the world waited for the 8 p.m. deadline, the kinetic war had already begun. Reports confirmed that U.S. and Israeli forces had already struck Karg Island, the absolute heart of Iran's oil economy. This wasn't a warning shot, it was a decapitation of the regime's bank account. Satellite footage captured the terrifying glow of the petrochemical complex in Shiraz and the rail bridge in Kashan as they were reduced to rubble. Trump's Bridge Day was not a metaphor. By taking out the Yahya Abad rail bridge, the U.S. military effectively cut the Iranian logistics network in half, leaving the IRGC's mobile missile units stranded on the wrong side of the desert. The smarter minds break through. But then, something revolutionarily wonderful, in Trump's own words, started to leak out of the Situation Room. Amidst the smoke of Karg Island, a back-channel deal was being forged. Trump's Truth Social post about complete and total regime change wasn't just a threat, it was a signal that a faction within Tehran, the smarter minds, had finally realized that the alternative was the total erasure of their history. While 14 million Iranians stood in human chains around power plants, a secret 10-point proposal was being reviewed. Iran was offering to reopen the Strait of Hormuz in exchange for a permanent end to the strikes. The civilization did not die tonight because, at the 59th minute, the pressure of total annihilation forced a pivot that decades of traditional diplomacy couldn't achieve. The global verdict, the Trump doctrine. As the sun rises on April 8th, the global community is left to pick up the pieces of a fractured world order. Critics are calling the civilization warning a violation of every international norm, a war crime in rhetoric. But for the supporters of the Trump doctrine, the results speak for themselves. The strait is opening, the nuclear centrifuges are slowing, and a major war was averted by standing on the very edge of it. The global economy, however, is in a state of shock. The IAEA has already declared this the worst energy crisis in human history, surpassing 1973 and 1979 combined. Even without a total war, the mere threat of ending a civilization has sent the world into a financial tailspin that will take years to recover from. We started this journey with a chilling warning from the Oval Office. We saw a nation turn its own citizens into human shields, and a president rewrite the rules of global engagement on a social media app. Trump told the world that 47 years of extortion, corruption, and death would end tonight. Whether this is a true peace or just a temporary pause in a much larger collapse, one thing is certain. The world will never look at the Middle East or the power of a single warning the same way again. The lights in Tehran stayed on. The civilization lived, but the world as we knew it, that died tonight. So, as the sun rises over the Persian Gulf on Wednesday morning, the world asks, did we just witness the greatest diplomatic bluff in history, or is this simply the eye of the storm? Donald Trump promised that 47 years of corruption and death would end tonight. The power plants are still humming, the bridges are still standing, but the civilization he threatened is now living under a different set of rules. The human chains have gone home, but they left behind a world where the unthinkable is now the expected. Because in this new era of global power, the clock never truly stops ticking. It just waits for the next deadline. And that brings us back to the very beginning, to the moment the world first heard those chilling words from the Oval Office.